Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today I'll be talking about the 2001 installment of Insurrextion, only on the WWE Network. And going back here, I talked about in the 2000 installment that most of the matches on that show weren't really storyline-driven. They were just kind of random. Still made for a fun show, but this show was more storyline-driven. I found myself more invested in the action and matches on this card, so we'll get down to it right now. Eddie Guerrero versus Grandmaster Sexy kicking off the show. Only about a 5-minute match, really wasn't anything special. I mean, I know this kind of goes back on what I was just saying before on all the matches being storyline driven. This match didn't really seem to have much of a purpose behind it, but still, though, I'm a big Grandmaster Sexy fan, a huge fan of Too Cool, so it was cool to see him in action. Eddie Guerrero was so great as a heel during this period in time. I loved his match against Chris Jericho the previous year. I talked about that in my last review. But the match on this show I thought was really, really good. Nice opening matchup between Eddie and Grandmaster Sexy. And, of course, Eddie Guerrero coming out victorious. So up next, we had Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko taking on the Holly Cousins, Hardcore Holly and Crash Holly, with Molly in their corner. Pretty standard matchup, only went about 5 minutes. And I thought it was good. I mean, I think Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko split up afterwards. So like I said before, more storyline driven. These two were part of the Radicals at this period in time. So they did show some dissension on this show by breaking up after the matchup. I think it might have been after this matchup, or maybe it was the year before. I think it might have been the year before. Yeah, it was Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko the previous year when they split up, but I guess they were back together by this point in time. I'm thinking of the 2000 installment, I'm sorry. But they would win on this show against the Holly Brothers. Again, nothing much of a special matchup, but a solid matchup for what it was for tag team action. Up next, we had Bradshaw, aka JBL, who would go on to become known as JBL a couple of years later, taking on the Big Show. This matchup lasted surprisingly only about 3 minutes. Bradshaw had a pretty impressive outing. I mean, I was never really into him as a singles guy. I was never a huge JBL fan. I just thought it was really weird, though, that they had him, because he still had the APA look. He was still going by Bradshaw. He had the whole theme song going on for the 2001 and 02 installments of Insurrextion. Ron Simmons was nowhere to be found, so I don't know what was going on with him at that period in time. Maybe he wasn't with the company, I'm not really sure. But I was never really into him as a singles guy. Like I said before, I had a nice outing here. The matchup was only about 3 minutes. Probably suffered from a lack of time, but for what it was fine while it lasted. Bradshaw picking up the victory. Up next, we had a Fatal 4-Way Elimination Tag Team matchup with Edge and Christian taking on the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and the X Factor, X-Pac and Just Incredible with Albert in their corner. I think that was known as like one of the worst factions in WWE history, given how random it was, how terrible the theme music was, something like that. I didn't think it was too bad. I think they might have been the first team eliminated here. But, taking them out of the equation, I thought this was a great match, considering the fact that 3 out of 4 of these teams were involved in the first ever TLC and ladder tag team matches, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. So for that reason alone, I thought this was a great matchup and a great showing from all 3 of those teams. Because remember, it was the year before that we had Edge and Christian versus the Hardy Boys for the tag team titles. There were no tag team titles on the line in this matchup, but still, though, it was a very entertaining matchup. Went about 13 minutes, could have gone a little bit more longer if it wanted to become more special. But for what it was, I really did enjoy it. And of course, this was around the period in time when these 3 teams were ripping it up every single week from 2000 to 01, right after, I think shortly removed from their 3-way TLC match at WrestleMania 17, because this took place in May, and that was in, I think, April 1st, 2001. So this is right after that, so I'm not really surprised. But still, a very enjoyable matchup there. Up next, we had Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle in a 2 out of 3 count falls match. Now, the significant part about this match was that they had a match on the prior year's installment of Insurrextion, and I complained about that in my review of that show, that their match only went about 5-6 minutes and was really, really disappointing. Fun while it lasted, but not the match that those two were capable of. They were given a much more longer time frame on this show. 15 minutes, again, could have gone longer, but for the time they were given, they absolutely made the most of it. A lot of great near falls, a lot of awesome action between Benoit and Angle. And even though Angle would pick up the victory in their first matchup at Insurrextion in 2000, Benoit would end up with the victory here with the win over Kurt Angle. So great match from these two. Dare I say, probably one of the better matches of the night, if not the match of the night. I thought it was great, and the 2 out of 3 count falls stipulation definitely helped them. Up next, we had Chris Jericho versus William Regal in a Duchess of Queensberry rules match for the Queen's Cup. And of course, this was shortly removed from their match for the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 17. I believe that matchup kicked off the show, if I do remember correctly. But I thought this was a good match for what it was. The Intercontinental Championship was not on the line here, of course, since the show was in England. William Regal was not the hometown hero. Chris Jericho absolutely was. But they showed a video of William Regal earlier on in the show of him doing like an autograph signing. They treated him like an absolute king, no pun intended, like an absolute god in his home country. And why wouldn't they? But he turned on the audience in a very nice manner, like a heel would. And instead of embracing the reaction they were giving him, he turned himself against his hometown crowd, which I thought was great and helped him get more heat during this matchup. And in the same result as WrestleMania 17, Jericho came out victorious and won the Queen's Cup from William Regal here in a very entertaining matchup. Again, went I think longer than most of the other matches, around 15 minutes almost. So great matchup from Jericho and Regal. Big fan of both guys, so I always enjoy seeing them work together. They had a pretty fun storyline for what it was worth at that time. And it kind of absolutely fit in with the England theme and William Regal being in its home country, and the fans didn't boo him for losing or didn't boo Jericho for winning and beating their hometown hero. Instead, they cheered because William Regal turned himself against his hometown crowd earlier on in the evening, so I thought that was great. But, of course, we get to the main event, The Undertaker versus the two-man power trip shortly before they got injured, before Triple H got out with an injury. Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWE Championship. Now, the rule here was that if Undertaker could pin Stone Cold, he would be crowned the new WWE Champion. He would not pin Stone Cold. He would pin Triple H, so technically he did pick up the victory, but not the championship. But for what it was, though, I thought it was a really, really good matchup. There was a lot of entertaining near falls. Undertaker, of course, had the odds stacked against him with Stephanie McMahon in Triple H's corner, but he did have a very good outing here. He got his ass handed to him for most of the matchup, but a lot of cool hope spots with Undertaker, overcoming the odds and still being able to beat Stone Cold and Triple H, yet not winning the championship. So a nice furthering of that storyline, so to speak. And this was around the same time that they were doing the Brothers of Destruction, Taker and Kane versus the two-man power trip over the tag team titles. And the power trip had held every major singles title in the WWE at that period in time. Triple H was the Intercontinental Champion, Stone Cold was the WWE Champion, and together they were the tag team champions, and only the WWE title was on the line here. So I thought that was a great matchup. And it would lead in nicely. I mean, it was one of the last great matches before Triple H got hurt. Because Triple H got hurt a short while afterwards and would take, I think, maybe 9 months off before returning in January of 2002. So, yeah, I thought it was a great matchup. And like I said before, a nice furthering of the storyline with the power trip and The Undertaker as well. Besides, sending the crowd home happy with Undertaker winning, you're not giving them a new WWE champion just yet. So that being said, I really enjoyed this show a lot more than I did the 2000 installment. That wasn't a bad show, but I thought this show was much more storyline driven and had a lot more, many more meaningful matches than it did just random matches out of nowhere. But if anything from the show is worth watching, I mean, I would recommend you go back and watch the shows in full, if only because, I mean, they're only not even 2.5 hours long. They're maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes. So they're really not that long compared to your average WWE pay-per-view. But if anything, go out of your way to watch the final hour of the show. I thought Benoit and Angle, Jericho and Regal, and especially the main event with Taker, Triple H, and Stone Cold were all great matches and definitely filled out the rest of the card nicely. And the undercard wasn't bad, especially the tag team match. I thought that was great too. Probably the latter half of this show is definitely worth going out of your way to see. Everything else isn't must-see, but, made out for a nice, fun undercard. But, yeah, on the whole, I give the show a thumbs up. I enjoyed it. Go back and watch it on the WWE Network. And in my next video, I'll be talking about the 2002 installment of Insurrextion, followed by the 2003 installment in my next video. That being said, folks, always appreciate the support. Make sure to find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews, Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be back soon with my review of the 2002 installment of Insurrextion. In the meantime and in between time, always appreciate the support, guys, and I'll catch you guys soon.